Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are playing on Wyvern's Lake as the High Elves against the Greenskins, and basically just figured I'm going to try a build that's akin to a lot of the builds I've seen used against me in my time playing as the Greenskins, and that is relying on Arcane Unforging to really see the day through. One of the new buffs to the Greenskins, the change to their Waagh mechanic. Now it only recharges in melee. But rather than being a small AoE with plus 44 melee attack, it is a map-wide monstrous boost to speed, charge bonus, and melee attack. So it's really strong. It lasts 30 seconds. It can basically ensure that that initial sort of greenskin charge gets massive value, and then your opponent is just sent reeling, and they're not really able to recover from that shock and awe. Arcane Unforging shuts that down hard. As you can see here, it adds 30 seconds to the ability recharge rate. Now, granted, it's a very expensive spell. It costs twice of what, say, Spirit Leech costs, and that's roughly the equivalent spell. But extra 30 seconds, and if you overcast it, if we look here at the overcast, it actually increases the penalty to ability recharge as well. But plus 16 seconds, or plus 30 seconds to ability recharge for 16 Winds of Magic means that Wartsag has to then go into melee for 30 seconds, or whatever your opponent's Lord is, has to go into melee for 30 seconds just to be able to cast Waagh. Usually at that point it's too late. You've already engaged them. You can already get about 30 seconds at least of free work done. And if your opponent is a little more hesitant, if they don't throw in right away, you can then cast a second Arcane Unforging, sometimes melt them down even further. Plus, Greenskin Lords, of course, are very susceptible to sniping, so it can be a very potent spell in this situation. I figured I'd give it a shot here with Alariel. Otherwise, she's mounted on an eagle just to stay safe and avoid enemies, especially if my opponent, say, brought Azag, this way she can run away. She's got the Star of Avalorn, of course, for the heals, Arcane Conduit, Earthblood, Frost Protection, and then Boon of Isha. This one, a little iffy against Greenskins. You don't necessarily need the immunity psychology or the magic damage. It can be good in Savage Rooks, but you don't necessarily need it, but yeah, I figured might as well. Then we did have the Shield of Safri as well as Life Boom, so it's both very good spells that provide some pretty nifty, or both very nifty abilities that cast when you make casting spells. For the front line, very elite. 3 units of Swordmasters of Hoeth, as well as the Pure Main Company. Basically figuring that because I can shut down my opponent's Waagh, I should be able to get good value in those early seconds. Now, normally Swordmasters, if your opponent gets their Waagh off, Swordmasters are going to have a very, very bad day. The big problem being, of course, that they only have 6,000 HP, so if the Orcs get their Waagh, the Black Orcs will hit quite a lot on the charge. They're going to melt your HP down below that 50% threshold. You're going to lose martial prowess, and then you're basically done. The Swordmasters without martial prowess cannot hold at all. They fall apart, and they just die. Despite the fact that they've gotten cheaper, I still think that if your opponent is able to blitz their HP really effectively, they're not a good unit. But in this situation, I figure I can make use of them, especially with Alariel's backing. The Pure Main Company anchoring things in the center. Honestly, stat-wise, they're pretty comparable to the Swordmasters. They're just a bit squishier, a little bit tankier against shooting, but they do have Guardian, they do have Armor Sundering, so I figured they could be a good little support unit here. And then we do have the Signs of Mathlin backing them up. And these guys are mostly here for their ward save. As long as you have, their ability here, Aura of Protection, as long as your Winds of Magic is, it actually says mana, which is funny, but as long as your Winds of Magic is above 50%, you get 12%. 12% ward save to all your troops nearby, which is really a rather strong improvement, strong buff that can definitely make your troops a lot tankier. On the periphery, 2 spears providing extra width to this formation. So basically the spears are just here to back up this front line. That is, I'm hoping, will carry the day. 2 Illyrian archers out on the flank. I think very good in this matchup. Greenskins have a lot of tools to oversaturate and screw over the high elf backline. Sure, Sisters of Avalorn or Lothan Seaguard probably aren't going to take losses or many losses to Goblin Spider Riders or Wolf Riders or Wolf Chariots or units like that, nasty Skulkers. But they get shut down. They get bogged down, and that means that you've got a disproportionate amount of resources tied down, wasting their time fighting off crappy units, and not shooting. So with the Illyrian Archers, you can avoid a lot of those common sort of harassment tools. You can pick them apart, and if push comes to shove, you can definitely use these guys as a normal sort of light cav. You can run down enemy archers, you can run down enemy skirmishers, and all that sort of stuff. They'll definitely dumpster, say, Bogarb's Maging Marauders or the Rusty Arrows in a straight-up fight, if need be. And otherwise, they can chip away at Black Orcs, they can chip away at Archers, Savage Orcs, Boarboy Big Guns, that sort of stuff. On the other flank, we do have the Fireborn. Not the biggest fan of elite anti-large sort of units against the Greenskins usually, but I figured, these guys do have a good bonus versus large, but they also have very solid normal stats, so they can run roughshod over, say, basically anything. Honestly, they can basically run roughshod over anything the Greenskins bring. They'll even take on a Ragnarok, I'm pretty sure, pretty reliably. So they're a really strong unit, really solid choice in my opinion. And I figured no matter what my opponent brings, I can probably get some good value out of these. And you always want some heavy cav against Greenskins, and if I'd brought, say, Dragon Princes instead, I'd only have 500 gold left over, so I'd end up having to buy like a unit of Spearmen, which isn't, in my opinion, that good. You'd end up with a unit of Archers or Spearmen for the cost. It's not worth it, in my opinion. For my opponent's build, once again, pretty elite. 4 Black Orcs, really anchoring the line here. They, of course, can do a lot of damage. Now, granted, they will lose in a 1v1 against... I don't know if they lose to the Pure Main Company, but they definitely lose to Swordmasters of Hoeth, who have just monstrous anti-infantry stats. But with the backing of the Waagh, with the backing of Spell Power, they can definitely lay the smackdown on the Swordmasters, and they're cheaper. They have immunity to psychology, so they don't tend to break if you bring, say, terror bombs. They can definitely, and against anything else high elf, they'll just crump it and win pretty decisively. So definitely something to watch out for. They are backed here by Savage Orcs. I also think these guys are a good choice in the high elf matchup. Despite the propensity for high elves to have shooting, these guys are very quick on their feet. They can flank around, they can get into your opponent's backline, they can crush spearmen, that sort of stuff. Then we do have the Rusty Arrows, providing some archer support. Never a bad idea to have at least a few shooting units, even against a shooting heavy faction like High Elves. The Mogreb's Mangy Marauders over here, providing some AP missiles. Out on the flank, hidden here in the trees, Broken Tusk Mob as well as Forest Goblin Spider Riders, so providing some anti-large AP, as well as usually the Forest Goblin Spider Riders are used to sort of muck up an enemy cavalry unit, soak up the charge, and then the Broken Tusk Mobs go in. I'm not entirely sure if they would beat the Fireborn, to be honest. The Fireborn just have such monstrous stats that I don't know if even the Broken Tusk Mobs could take on them, but you never know. They're definitely a strong unit. And they are backed here by Wartsag, who does have Here We Go, as well as Foot of Gork. He also does have Waagh and Effigy at the Git. Of course, Squiggly Beast, he's got Bonewood Staff. The Warpaint of Wartsag, which I don't actually think is worth it anymore. I think it used to be like really good when it was at 11%. Now it's 6%. Not really. Power of the Waagh. Interestingly enough, no Fists of Gork, which I think is a really good choice if you're trying to... One, it lets, say, a cavalry unit like the Broken Tusk Mob with Fists of Gork can do an absolute number on a unit like Dragon Princes, because it gives them magic damage, it gives them a monstrous boost to melee attack and melee defense, so it's going to be really solid. It also is a cheaper spell with which you can then proc... it's a cheaper spell with which you can then proc Bonewood Staff more often, which is a great little buff. Then my opponent finally does have 2 units of Forest Goblin Spider Riders, or it's not Forest Goblin Big Bosses on Forest Spiders here. And of course they do have, surprisingly, they've actually got the Sword of Anti-Heroes by the look of it, which is something you don't see all that often. It does give them a little bit of extra goon potential, especially with Wartsag's Effigy at the Git. Regardless, over here the Lyrian Reavers do take a casualty because I didn't see the Arrow Boys, the Rusty Arrows here, hidden until they opened fire. But so far the trade has not been particularly bad for either side. We lost a Reaver, my opponent lost a Gabo. Not the end of the world. But we are going to start advancing a little bit. You can see I'm pushing the spears forward, figuring that they can soak up my opponent's charges, they can soak up my opponent's arrows. I do not want my Swordmasters of Hoeth wasting their charges on these Savage Orcs. Because then they'll get countercharged by the Black Orcs. Black Orcs have an absolutely beastly charge bonus of 29, even after the nerf. It used to be 30, but now it's 29, so still monstrous. They'll definitely do a lot of hurt, and so I want the Swordmasters getting their charge in on my opponent. Now over here, Wartsag is pushing forward, but this is going to allow me to use Lariel's Arcane Unforging, and it's going to hit him, and you can see it's just melting off his HP. And one of the big problems for Wartsag, and I actually think he's a rather good lord, I think he's awesome, but Wartsag, you can see the Arcane Unforging's only gone through about 2/3. It's taking off huge amounts of his HP. He's already lost about 700. He's probably going to lose another 700 before it wears off, and he's just taken a monstrous amount of work. Plus, he's lost the ability to cast Waagh. I don't know. I think this is honestly something that should be changed. I don't know if it will be. But currently, if you're in a faction that has Arcane Unforging or Malekith with the sword, what is this? I think it's Dark Sword, and then if you've got the undead one, Curse of Years, you can really reset your opponent's abilities like this and really ruin their day. So especially for the Greenskins here, who are really reliant on the Waagh to get stuff done. But regardless, you can see we are chipping away at Mogreb's Mangy Marauders. They are getting shot down. Now, granted, they're getting some fire back at us, but honestly, 2 Lyrian Reaver Archers lost so far in exchange for 10 Marauders, but we're also, our mangy Marauders here, but we're also chipping away, and we've already taken 13 offline there. My opponent actually doesn't pay attention because he's trying to micro his archers away, which means he ends up having his Savage Orcs caught here by my spears. The spears actually get their charge off, and that means these Savage Orcs with their monstrous charge bonus are now stuck in a kind of grindy, atrocious shootout, or a slug out with the spears. You see the spears actually getting the advantage in that the opening phase there. Mogos Ancient Marauders zoned off. My opponent does hit my Illyrian Reaver Archers with an effigy to get, but it's completely wasted. Now, granted, as I do start chipping away these Rusty Arrows, I don't pay the best attention. My opponent is going to get a little bit of Foot of Gork here, a little bit of stompy action, but it doesn't really do anything. I don't even think it got a kill. And in the meantime, the fight in the front line is definitely breaking down. My opponent, you can see, committing his Savage Orcs, but similar to me being a little patient here with his Black Orcs, he's not willing to commit them just yet. He's only committed one unit. Not sure if this was simply micro limitations for my opponent or if it was planned, but it does look like he was trying to hope to bait me into the charge first. So a little bit of holding back, letting cheap chaff units do the fighting. Regardless, over here on the flank, you can see the Fireborn swinging around as the Illyrian Reaver Archers just unload on these poor Rusty Arrows. And although these guys are not exactly supposed to, you don't normally want to be shooting out with these units, they'll do okay. Over here in the meantime, my opponent does actually flank with his cavalry, which is definitely bad for me, but in the meantime, I'm getting another Arcane Unforging on poor Wardsack. You can see he's getting hit, and it is just melting his HP. Wardsack doesn't have good armor. I think armor sometimes helps resist magic damage a little bit, but you can see he's really low, and I actually dive in with Alariel. She's going for the KO. He's just getting melted horribly, and Wardsack is really in for a bad day. In the meantime, the Fireborn, although they will start taking some casualties to these annoying Goblin big bosses who have popped their Swords of Anti-Heroes, they are able to run amok, crush the Rusty Arrows, and really put it into their day. In the meantime, the Star of Avalorn going down over here. Unfortunately, I could have probably saved it for this area, which is about to get a brutal rear charge. Rear charges, of course, a reduced melee defense by a good significant amount, so it's going to make these Swordmasters a lot more susceptible to damage, and you can see that huge monstrous charge is really destroying these guys. And like I said before, once these guys lose their martial prowess, they tend to tank very quickly, and it's one of those their main disadvantages. However, I do get a little bit of a counter charge here. The Fireborn just continuously moving, plowing into these guys and sort of pushing them off the Swordmasters, who, although they are taking damage and they are going to drop, they're going to lose their martial prowess here, they are still fighting, and they are going to hold at least for a little bit. Unfortunately for my opponent, this flank is going a lot worse. Now, Alariel over here helping dive the Goblin Big Boss. You can see I'm getting a nice little surround here with the Fireborn. And although my opponent will be able to get rear charges here, in the meantime, I am able to sort of melt this front line, and there's just so much infantry here that even though he does get charges, he's going to be taking a lot of damage, and we are going to counteract there with an Earthblood. Of course, there's no longer a Ward Save Aura, I don't believe. I think that was just the Shield of Sapphire going off, but there's no longer a Ward Save Aura going down. But you can see the Broken Tusk Mob here taking casualties. The Forest Goblin Spider Eye is getting melted a good bit. Here in the back line, Alariel and her boys, the Fireborn here, knocking down this annoying Forest Goblin Spider Rider, or the Goblin Big Boss, get a full surround on him with his terrible armor and somewhat mediocre melee defense against these sort of elite high elf anti-large troops. He is going to have a terrible day. You can see he's losing hundreds of HP a second, and he's just going to get wrecked. So really bad times for the Greenskins. The front line buckling. Now my opponent still does have the Mogos Managing Marauders, but really at this point it's just a little too late. His cavalry here doing their very best, but these Swordmasters are still relatively healthy. Sure, the Pure Main over here, we're probably going to lose this fight. The Swordmasters, I feel, will lose to the Black Horse. I don't know. It's a tight fight. Of course, morale is going to swing it in their favor, but yeah, it was a tight fight. I don't entirely know, but regardless, the fight does end there with a close victory for the High Elves. So definitely one of those things. I definitely think Arcane Unforging is an amazing pick. If you're playing a faction that has access to it against Greenskins, you might not need it with certain factions like Lizardmen, because you usually bring a bunch of monsters, and Greenskins have trouble against those. You might not necessarily want Arcane Unforging, but against factions that don't have, against factions that do have sort of a reset button like that, for Dark Elves, I definitely think Malekith is a good choice here. Even if you don't bring him on a dragon, if you can just bring him on a cold one, if you can get close, reset your opponent's cooldown with the help of the I do believe it's the Dark Sword, that can be a huge boon. Similarly, if you do that with Undead and Curse of Years, it can be a really powerful ability. So definitely look out for that. Definitely can be pretty potent. Otherwise, for this build, I do think it's pretty decent against the Greenskins. You always need something to deal with Black Orcs, and the only units I think High Elves really have that deal well with Black Orcs are actually Swordmasters of Helith. Unfortunately, they are very susceptible, like we just discussed, like I discussed in the video. They are really susceptible to if they lose their HP. But if you're able to sort of protect them, shelter them from that initial charge with Waagh active, they can definitely pay for themselves. They can definitely take on Black Orcs 1-to-1 and win. Fireborn, not a bad choice. Otherwise, you basically have to go cavalry heavy. Bring a lot of heavy cav, like Dragon Princes, Fireborn, that sort of stuff. And try to cycle charge your opponent to death. Sisters of Avalorn can work, but I don't like them because Greenskins can bring a lot of light cav. If your opponent just decides to bring 4 Wolf Riders, that's barely more expensive than a single unit of Sisters of Avalorn, and they can shut you down for basically the duration of the game. So that's something to keep in mind. Regardless, good game to my opponent here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions about the game, anything like that, be sure to post them down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.